You know the devices you say you use when you're praying to get in, deeply into the prayers. I
Yeah.
was wondering if it's too academic or something to act as if you were actually composing those prayers.
So you're
You see kind of what I mean, that you
so
have.
you now what out of what situation, like,
You're
for instance,
trying to connect
right, but
yourself
I'm
with
saying, but even a
Hashem.
composer
Yeah.
is somewhere. In other words, let's let's say somebody is a poet or is painting, so they see something, and in many instances they see something and then they want to share what they see, so they're
Yeah.
using their craft to share what they see. So I'm assuming that that's the same thing. If I was composing music, I'm trying to share something I hear, but
Yes. Or
so
that you feel.
you'd have to be in the the place where he's hearing it. It's not simply, let's say the composer, it's not simply deciding, like there is a essay written by Edgar Allan Poe about his process when he wrote The Raven.
Oh.
And it was very mechanical. He first thought about what mood he wanted it to represent. And the most popular most popular were either joy or melancholy. And melancholy was actually, I think he decided, the most popular. In other words, it would impact the most people, or the most people would be interested in it. So he first decided on having it be melancholy, and then he decided that he needed, like a phrase repeated. I think he even picked the style before he ever got to his subject. He had done all this decision making, and then it only finally was filled in by what he felt would fit all the other criteria that he had come up with before. That, I would admit, if somebody composed like that, then a lot of the activities happening in the brain before the experience that he's trying to communicate ever unfolds. But to me, a lot, like Tehillim is characterized as coming out of an experience. Although David Foreman does have this theory, which he has used to interpret Tehillim, which might fit more the Edgar Allan Poe method, because like he'll take one of the Tehillim and he'll say something like, "This is the author of the Tehillim. Let's say it's King David, imagining himself as Yehuda at the time of the sale of Yosef." So, or reflecting, not at the time, but reflecting on the sale of Yosef. So again, he's not in the experience, he's projecting himself into the experience. It would have to be like, because otherwise, I think if what's happening is you're in an experience, you're seeing something or you're hearing something, and you're trying to communicate what you're seeing or you're hearing at that moment, then thinking of yourself as the composer is not enough. You have to put yourself in that place and see what the composer, or hear what the composer's hearing, and then it, like maybe be writing the words. But the writing the words is just a way of
expressing what
expressing what
you
you saw
yeah,
or what
right.
you hear.
Yeah, I see what you
I remember I was once listening. There's this guy, I think his last name's McLaughlin. He has this show. They always play it on WFMT. I mean, he's had it for years. I think he's from St. Paul, which is exploring music.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, and he just does this
Absolutely brilliant
job of just helping you appreciate where the music is coming from, and sort of guiding you, of people like me who know very little about music, to appreciate what you're listening to. I remember one time he had Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto. There were several years where I was teaching at Anshe Shalom in Lakeview, and I began when I was living in West Riders Park, and then I even did it for a couple of years when I was living in Northbrook. So it was a decent drive, and it happened to coincide when that show was on. So there was a period of time where I was listening to it all the time. So there was one night when it was Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto, and I had this experience where
fourth. You sure it wasn't the first?
it was the fourth. It was the fourth.
Wow.
And I had this experience that, for the first step of it was that he was hearing the music, and this was, it might have been Daniel Barenboim. It was somebody like that, who was actually the pianist. And I had this moment where he is being moved by the music. So at first it felt like, he was being moved by Beethoven, but then it struck me, in that experience, in that split second, that even Beethoven could have been moved by this music, and that in some ways it was music having, finding a way to be played. It just felt like that in the moment. And so I imagine that there would be experiences like that where they hear the music, and it's sort of like the music channeling itself, or the music is having itself be played. And so again, from that experience, and certainly you could see that with literature, you hear a lot of authors say that once the characters come alive to them, they start to move the narrative. Like at some point, the story is writing itself, to some degree. So, but I guess you could have both. You could have some where the process is beginning in the mind of the composer, and some where you're channeling something, and something you hear or you see.
especially Beethoven, because it wasn't auditory sometimes, it was just
right? Towards the end, right? But again, I would say there's like music. Yeah, he's not responding to something he actually is hearing, but that there's music that's sort of alive in him or something like that. Yeah, so I guess those are. It would work. I think it would work. For me, it would be harder because I think because I would expect that for me, I would have to see or hear something first. That's mostly, I do both, I guess. I do both. I don't tend to want to. I tend to want to articulate what I'm hearing or seeing as opposed to just composing. But I do it sometimes. I guess I do that, where I just think, what am I supposed to say? And then I come up with a way of saying it, and it's not the result of something I'm feeling or hearing or seeing. But I don't like them as much. I don't think they work as much.
Well, that's kind of when we're doing the prayers, what we're supposed to be doing is feeling it from our insides, even though we're reading someone else's words.
Right. And that's why I use the example of an actor.
Right.
But you could also use the example of a pianist. I am certain that the great musicians at some point have been mentored to find it, to find that truth within them that they're expressing, that they're not merely playing something that it's just notes on paper, but that there's some kind of expression coming from within them.
Yeah, I think the reason I thought that was because sometimes I have a very hard time with the liturgy itself. So I want to be able to get into it through me, not
right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it could be a turn of phrase. Like somebody showed me from Slichos the term sour grapes. And he said, look at this, sour grapes. This is a term that goes all the way back to Slichos liturgy. So, but when I looked at it in the Hebrew, it really means an unripened grape. And so I was suggesting to him that the translator chose sour grapes because that's a turn of phrase that we use, but that it's not. There's something more to the description than something simply sour grapes in the Hebrew. But for him, that was a turn of phrase that changed his experience with that, which would otherwise be not relatable to some degree. So I do know people that like look around for different translations to see if they can find a translation that speaks more to them. There aren't a ton of options, but there are.
Have to know Hebrew. I'd have to know Hebrew
Right.
better.
Right. But let's say there's some people like Jonathan Sacks, his translations. There's some people who, like, I remember when Jonathan Sacks was talking about, I looked for it in writing. I think I saw it in a taped lecture of his, but he was talking about translating the word hevel, because it comes specifically in the context of Koheles, this term, which is translated as folly or vanity. It's this word that is so important at the beginning of Koheles. Everything is hevel. So
what was Cain's name?
What?
What was Cain's name?
Yeah,
in
Hevel.
Hebrew?
Exactly, Hevel. Yeah, so
Mhm.
So so he landed on something like fleeting. He may have used the word fleeting, but it was something like fleeting, because he after really thinking about it a lot, decided that that was the notion, because Hevel most specifically is like a breath. It's like, but imagine like a breath in the cold, where you can see your breath. So that is at its core, at its most specific meaning, it's something like that. And he suggested that if you look at the context and see how it plays through, this is one of the most frustrating things to Shlomo, is that your accomplishments, your achievements, they're just like a fleeting something. They have some kind of for a moment they seem to have substance, and then they just disappear. So that, like that kind of thinking about a word, and then giving it an English word that somehow can capture that same thing. You could see what a difference something like that could make. So there's some people who really like Jonathan Sacks's translations. There's all different ones. The Koren translation of the Siddur, Koren, they said that they very much liked the poetry of the King James, but obviously the King James is not built on Jewish tradition. So what they tried to do is keep elements of the King James while staying true to the Jewish tradition of what, of what these words mean. So it has some of that old world feeling in the Koran one. Art Scroll wanted it to feel contemporary, and great emphasis on making sure that it was in keeping with Jewish tradition. So like each one of the translations is trying something different, and it could be that you find that for certain things you like one translation, and for other things you don't. Like Rabbi Foreman prefers, for his style of teaching, he prefers the JPS 1917 translation of the Torah. Even though it doesn't sound contemporary, they made great effort to translate words as truthfully. I don't know, truthfully is not a great word, but as literally. Even though the sentence may not read as easily, they wanted to give the best translation for the word. And so that is the most useful for him when he's trying to teach the way he teaches. So he will gravitate towards that for that. But if you wanted to, let's say there was somebody who just wanted to read a section of the Torah because you want to become familiar with it, you may end up reading Aryeh Kaplan's translation of the Torah, because he makes great effort to make it modern and relatable, at the same time keeping with tradition. But so when you're reading Aryeh Kaplan's translation, it reads, it reads in a contemporary way, and it's relatable. But he's not making the same effort to keep the words to their specific meaning.
Yeah, David just said the living Torah. That's
right, the living
living.
Torah.
Right.
Right. So like if there's somebody who said, I've suggested to some people, they just don't have any familiarity with the stories in the Torah. Take the Living Torah and just read through it, because that is useful for that. But it's not as useful if you're trying to get at the specific meaning of a word. So I know people like Rabbi Twersky. I remember one time I was davening with him at the Kotel, and he had like 3 Sidurim, and he was saying like he likes this one for this and this one for, he has one main siddur, but then he likes this one for these kind of things and this one for that kind of thing. And you could see people having a bunch of different Sidurim after a while, sort of each one for a particular thing. And sometimes all of them together when you're trying to figure out something about something in the siddur. Yeah. So that's the best I can suggest, is if you're looking for inspiration from the siddur. The siddur itself, by the way, it rewards a close study, but it's very rare that people do it. But it is a very rich source of Torah, and it has elements from all different generations that are connected to it, very ancient stuff, like quotes from Tanakh, and then other kind of elements that are stuff from the Zohar, stuff from that was written by mystics, even more modern stuff that reflects the modern state of Israel and stuff. So there's all sorts of elements in it, and it really does reward a rich study of it. And so, like, if there was a particular part of the davening that is frustrating, sometimes the best thing you can do is decide you're going to do a deep dive into that section. For me, the experiential, the way I've been talking about it, is the part that works best for me. But I've stumbled into things, like I think I've shared this like several years ago, but I stumbled into a way of experiencing the Amida, the weekday Amida, just because of an idea, and then it just looked like I should try something. And then when I tried it, it like opened up a whole experience that I had not expected at all. And it came from imagining myself, let's say with the Amida, imagining myself in the Beit HaMikdash, and using the Beit HaMikdash as a kind of memory palace, where I try to imagine the different parts of I imagine myself standing in different parts of the Beit HaMikdash at different points in the prayer. So at one point I'm near the altar outside, and there were times, let's say it was rainy and cold outside, so I would imagine I'm standing at the altar and it's raining and it's cold and the fire's still, blazing on top of the altar, but the Kohanim are walking around. You can hear them walking in like puddles, around while stuff is going on, and it's at night. Let's say it was Ma'ariv, and it's at night, and that's where I am for the first 3 blessings, and then I move inside the building, and I'm at one point looking at the menorah for one of the blessings, and I'm standing next to the incense altar inside, And when I'm near the incense altar, I like try to inhale the incense. So I'm having that kind of experience while I'm saying each one of these blessings. And I sort of stumbled into doing it, and it was, just an amazing experience. I wasn't sure when it was first going on if what was happening was even what I should be doing. Like I wasn't sure that there was like, really, when it happened, it was just like one idea and then another idea, and then it just,
Where
was-
were you on this? Where were you on this?
I'm standing in the Amida, but while I'm standing in the Amida, I'm imagining myself in each one of those places. At some point, I'm part of a group that's dancing outside in the courtyard. At one point, I'm with the Sanhedrin, in the room of the Sanhedrin. So in order to get better at it, I would look at pictures, or I would, as this was happening, I had some basic idea from just studying about it, what it might look like. But then after that, I became very interested in different pictures. I was at a shul. I daven at this shul every once in a while. My son AY davens there, Rabbi Ephraim Tursky's shul in Chicago, in West Rogers Park, and they have a parochas that has a depiction of the building of the Beis HaMikdash, the actual building, which is called the Heichal. So it has a tapestry of the Heichal, and it has a balcony that it looks like one of those balconies a king would come out and wave to the crowd from. A balcony like that above, it's high up on the building structure. And it was the first time I ever saw anything like that. And I remember going up to Rabbi Ephraim going, "Where is that from?" And he wasn't sure. It's not clear how this person decided there was one like that. And it probably is sourced somewhere. I don't know. But it was like things like that. I would see that, and then I would go, am I going to incorporate that? Like when I stand there from now on, is that going to be there? And also there were some times where I would do it in the Mishkan as opposed to the Beit HaMikdash, because in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, it's smaller and more, there's something more intimate. And so the idea of the soft light from the menorah, let's say the soft light from the menorah and the curtains and the incense in a more intimate, earthy kind of setting. So there's some times where that was more appealing, and I would go in from there. But anyways, I had this like concern, like, am I just doing this and it's just a fiction in my head and I'm not supposed to, and it's not really furthering anything deep. Just because I'm having what feels like a deep experience doesn't mean it's really deep, spiritual. It could just be, I'm just having an experience. And then I happened to notice, I was reading in the back of the ArtScroll Siddur, they have a halacha section, and I don't know why they included this, but they included a line from Rabbi Yosef Karo from the Shulchan Aruch, who said, when you're davening the Amida, imagine yourself in the Beis HaMikdash. Imagine yourself in the Beis HaMikdash. And I quickly looked it up in the Shulchan Aruch, and he said, that's what he says.
Wow.
And then it was like, oh my gosh. Because
Wow.
usually you hear people say, direct your prayers towards the Beit HaMikdash. You're here, and that your prayer is going towards the Beit HaMikdash. But he said, imagine yourself in the Beit HaMikdash. And then I spoke about it with some of my friends who are more expert in tefillah, and two of them, I told them, exactly what I'm doing, and they thought it is, it's something. It wasn't nothing. It was something. But so that's an example. That was like an example of sort of falling into it experientially. And then this kind of world opens up. I remember one time, there was one time Aviva Zornberg came to one of my classes. It was her father's yortzeit, and she wanted some learning on her father's yortzeit. So she asked me if she could go to one of my classes that I was teaching that day. And so I took her to a class where I was using Rabbi Foreman's videos, and I'm like the teacher's assistant kind of person. So it was his particular class that video was about midrash, and using making sure that you remember the verse the verses that the midrash is connected to. He was saying that you absolutely need to, you can't divorce the midrash from the verse. It's a mistake. A lot of times people have collections of midrashim and they're just reading the midrashim as standalone. But he was suggesting this is a mistake because the midrash is connected to the verse, and he compared it to a pianist who is playing both melody and harmony. So you can live with melody alone. I mean, a lot of people hum a tune and that's what they're doing. But the harmony, the left hand is adding dimensions to that melody that make it almost something other than what the melody is alone. It's so much richer, so much deeper, so it has more dimensions to it. But if you listen to just the harmony on itself, it's often meaningless. The harmony needs the melody, and the left hand needs the right hand, and the medrash is the left hand. And he was making that point. So when we were talking about it in the car afterwards, I suggested this. I suggested it in the class too. Oh, this is what happened. I in the class after the video, when he was talking about it, I just wanted to add this element that it's not simply that harmony is being technically added. This is sort of related to that discussion about are you in it or are you just being intellectual? It's not simply an intellectual connection to the melody. It's sometimes you're responding to what you hear, and that the medrash is like that too. In other words, the medrash is not simply, okay, we want to talk about this subject. Where's a convenient place to talk about this subject? Oh, over here, this would be a convenient place to talk about this subject because it's already saying X, Y, Z, so we're going to put it in over here. That is one way the midrash could happen. But
are there more than one midrash for a Torah verse?
No. There could be.
Really?
No, she once quoted 5 different midrashim related to Sarah hearing about the Akedah.
Uh-huh.
Just that nuance, not just the Akedah, not just the verse, but Sarah hearing about it. There was one which Rashi quotes where the Satan said he almost killed, like he almost killed him. There's one where the Satan tells her he killed him. There's one where she meets Yitzchak, and it's Yitzchak who tells her about what happened. I remember she quoted like 4 different midrashim just about that. And obviously there's some areas that are richer with midrashim and some that are more spare with them. And when I say midrash, I'm also including the Agadata in the Gemara, which is the same thing. So it could be it's found in the Gemara, it could be it's found in Midrash Rabbah collection. There's the Yalkut Shimoni collection. There's something called Medrash Tanhuma. There's a bunch of different collections of Midrash, and sometimes they're on a different angle. Sometimes they're on the same. They're looking at the same thing, but they're slightly different. Like there's also Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer. Like on that, I just been studying Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer with this group, and there's on that verse, "Let us make man." So in Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, God is talking to the Torah when he says, "Let us make man." In some, he's talking to the angels when he says, "Let us make man." There's some where he's just using the royal we when he says, "Let us make man." Like there's different sort of angles on it. But the thing I was trying to emphasize was that sometimes it's just an intellectual process, but sometimes it's that they're hearing something. In other words, they are responding to what they're hearing. And she told me afterwards that she liked that. She happened to like that notion. That in other words, they're not looking for a place to place their teaching. They're just there in this place, and they hear this. And they're fleshing out, or they're sharing what they're hearing in a way that's coded or highly poetic or whatever. And yeah, so okay. The most important thing is to use what works in all these things. I don't think there's one way that it has to be, but finding what works, and
Right.
it's richly rewarded if you do. I mean, if you find something that works, it's not simply a device to help you make it through the experience of the davening. It's you become richly rewarded by it, in my experience. Okay, I am
Rabbi,
yeah.
I just have to add a musical toe note,
Thank you.
is so much like license than a footnote. But they once asked Sanson, who was, despite his name, he was Jewish, and they asked him how he composed music, because he was of great renown. He says, "You ask me how I compose music. I ask you, how does an apple tree produce apples?" And if you read a lot of these composers, Schumann and Schubert, especially, a lot of their things came to them in the middle of the night. They woke themselves up to write it down. So however that exactly translates, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
David, how'd you know all this stuff?
David is a pianist.
Is he?
Classical.
Yeah.
Sam's family are violinists.
Man, I'm a pianist.
Oh,
And I'm a pianist.
you are.
Yeah.
Do you play? Have you ever played Beethoven's Fourth?
No. No.
Oh,
So
neither have I.
One of the challenging things, apparently, in the fourth piano concerto was that the piano begins and then the orchestra has to.
Da, 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 da,
Nice.
da.
The
I like what you said, David. It's very interesting.
right. And don't and also, like, if you get one of those inspirations and you start at the place of the inspiration, you may not know where it's going to go, and that's okay. Doesn't have to. It's a little bit scary. When for me it was a little bit scary because it was the Shemona Esrei, it was the Amida, and I didn't want to be messing with the Amida, but it just seemed like it made so much sense, and then I feel like
Rabbi, it's funny because I've as someone who plays the piano, I've always had the urge to try to compose, and when I have composed, the only time somebody composed it first. I hope you get my joke.
Message for
You know that somebody already composed it. That was disappointing.
Yeah. Okay, guys.
Thank
Sam,
you.
am I going to see you in a little bit?
Sam's from left.
Oh, Sam left. Okay. All right. I'll be well and
Fire
have a
alarm in the
Gemara
building just went off.
Chasima Tova. Have a meaningful Yom Kippur. I look forward
Thank
to
you.
learning with you guys next week.
Thank
Be
you,
well.
Rabbi.
Us too.
Okay.
You too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Be well. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi
Bye.
Karsh.